Don't Look in the Basement is a 1973 psychological horror film directed by S.F. Brownrigg. Or perhaps it's more appropriate to call it a psychiatrical horror film, since this is a film within that subgenre of horror films set in sanitariums, a fertile field of inspiration for fear, from Dr. Caligari to Shutter Island. In these films, the greatest danger isn't merely physical. The mind, the grasp of reality, is under attack. In an isolated farmhouse in Texas, a psychiatrist is experimenting with therapies intended to help the most traumatized of patients. The experiments go very badly, and soon there's a couple of job openings. A young nurse, unaware of these events, arrives to work at the facility and live among the patients. As she learns about her patients, she discovers the extremity of their conditions and that the reality of her situation may be much graver than she realizes. This film was created for the drive-in audience, and it delivers in that regard. There's a bit of nudity thanks to the nymphomaniacal patient around minute 25. You've got multiple axe murders, throat slashes, a ripped tongue, an eye poke, death by luggage. While this film wasn't even the bloodiest of its time, it was intense enough to have the film banned in the UK for at least a decade. It certainly got its share of expected shocks and claustrophobic tensions, as well as some particularly effective performances from Bill McGhee and Annabelle Weenick. Also, it has one of my favorite end credit sequences ever. A couple of things elevate the film above its contemporaries. It does a good job with managing its secrets, the things we know before Nurse Charlotte does, versus the things we learn alongside her. The film also explores the inner lives of the patients, providing more sympathy than other films in its genre had previously done. On the other hand, when you cast people to play mental hospital patients, there's a risk of overplaying the role, and that does happen in some cases in both good and bad ways. And it aggravates a really bad habit in this script where somebody over-explains the twist they just revealed, loudly and repeatedly for the people in the back. Don't Look in the Basement utilized many aspects of Brownrigg's film training. His filmmaking career started in the U.S. Army, making training films. After the Army, he worked on TV commercials for the Jameson Film Company, a Dallas-based production studio, and an incubator for future Hollywood talent. It was also in Dallas that Brownrigg would meet local filmmaker and self-described schlockmeister Larry Buchanan. Brownrigg would join production teams on several films for Buchanan in the 60s, including The Naked Witch, starring Libby Hall. Sometime after completion of The Naked Witch, Brownrigg and Hall would be husband and wife. In 1972, the Jameson Film Company was dismantled. While many former employees began their own production companies or started making their way to Hollywood, Brownrigg stayed in Dallas to direct his first feature film. At the time of release, perhaps the biggest name in the cast was Jessie Lee Fulton, who had most recently appeared in back-to-back Oscar-winning films, The Last Picture Show and Paper Moon. Rosie Holotik was Playboy magazine's April 1972 cover girl. After Basement, she would also have memorable performances in the anthology Encounter with the Unknown, as well as the 1974 original Horror High. Don't Look in the Basement was originally released as The Forgotten. When a new distributor picked up the film for re-release, The Forgotten was retitled to complement Last House on the Left, one of that distributor's other acquisitions. The promotional material even echoed Last House on the Left's tagline, "It's only a movie, it's only a movie." Don't Look in the Basement was the first of a quartet of exploitation films that Brownrigg made between 1973 and 1977, injecting Southern Gothic sensibilities into the grindhouse aesthetic. Those films were enough to cement his cult filmmaker status. But it wasn't until 2015, almost 20 years after his death, that a sequel, Don't Look in the Basement 2, was released. Anthony Brownrigg wrote and directed the sequel to his father's film, which returns to the farmhouse 40 years later. It possesses a different tone, more contemporary, more supernatural, more consistently bloody. It's a smart continuation of the original mythology and a heartfelt send-off to the original characters. The sequel's available on Amazon Prime and other streaming services. As for watching the original Basement, a couple of tips. 1. Don't worry about the basement. It's not that big a deal. 2. The movie starts strong with the mayhem, giving the audience 2 murders in the first 10 minutes, and then it asks the audience to wait. Be patient. The last 10 minutes of the movie brings back the mayhem strong. And on your way to the end of the film, Take in the atmosphere that Brownrigg has created and get to know the patients, the forgotten that the original title referred to. Ask yourself, which of these were irredeemable before they arrived, and which have been ruined by this place? And of course, consider the question all stories in this subgenre ask. Which one of these characters is sane?